starting a little late. Looks like people are starting to get settled in. I'll wait a minute. This panel is called The GOT Effect, The Thrones Effect. It's about A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones, but obviously Game of Thrones has had a greater cultural impact. You could really see how, A Song of Ice and Fire get catapulted into the stratosphere with it, so it is named that. But we're going to talk a bit about pop culture references to Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire, TV shows and movies, music, and all that. We're going to talk a bit about species named after A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones characters, because there actually are quite a few named after them. We're going to talk about the impact on our lives personally, on, things like people have things tattooed on their bodies and stuff like that. So let's get into it, right?
Let's do it.
Okay, so I think you all know who we are, but I'm Ashaya. I do History of Westeros podcast. Woo!
I'm Zach. I do the Thrones podcast.
I'm David Peterson, and I do Langtime Studio.
I'm Dude. That's Dude.
So one thing I want to start off by pointing out that I think is really interesting about Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire as a fandom, is that unlike things like Star Wars and Marvel, it's achieved this ubiquity by appealing to an adult audience. They don't get to get kids while they're young and find lifelong fans. It's one of the few fandoms I think that really is very adult geared, because even some of your other fantasy series, you could read them you could be pretty young and read Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Also, other stuff that has weekly content. If your librarian's really nice when you're a kid and they take a shining to you, they're like, hey, you should read this book. Stuff like Sword of Shannara has a little bit of wittiness, but not as much as Peter, or not as Peter says. Looking at you, not as much as Martin. Yeah, David wrote the books. Everybody, be good.
Wouldn't that be a twist for the second book?
So, I mentioned that there are species named after Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. And first of all, there are quite a few. I'm going to go through some of them. There are some beetle species named after Game of Thrones characters. There is Gymnetus dragoni, regali, and Viserioni, which I think sounds like a kind of pasta. They are beetles. There are also, I have to say, some beetles named after the actual Beatles. So that's fun. There are other animals, other species named after the dragons, but this is the thing. There's ants and stink bugs, two species. I said two, not three. In both of those cases, Rhaegal got the shaft. We have a Drogon ant, we have a Viserion ant, and a stink bug, but no Viserion.
Yes.
Because it
No
has
wriggle.
an extra H and an A in it. Who wants that? I was stuck with that, the R-H-A-E. Oh. I had to do stuff with that in those languages.
What's hard about that?
You're staring daggers at
I'm
me.
just trying to understand why that's so hard versus Caraxes. They're all hard and weird. It's a different story, but
The AEs are hard, I think.
okay.
I think it's that, not the AEs. I think it's the AE. So we've also got Daenerys herself does have some species named after her. There's a sea slug, Tritonia khaleesi, and a wasp, Iaja Daenerys. So we got two after her. Zach, there are some worms as well, right?
Here we go, guys.
Well, tell us about these worms, please.
Okay, I was surprised the second Danny one wasn't also Khaleesi. I thought it was going to be another Khaleesi with a different prefix. Okay, 3 deep sea worms are named after Game of Thrones characters. You guys ready for those? Hodor? Can I get a Hodor from the crowd? Yeah, that's pretty good. Arya, and in a mashup of both Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, of course, why wouldn't you? One was named Hodor Anduril. Now you guys know both of those stories. That's a pretty strong mix-up, the sword and Hodor. One was named Hodor Anduril after Game of Thrones is Hodor and Lord of the Rings is Anduril. It says a special sword. Yes, it is a very special sword.
And as an aside, Game of Thrones has a lot of species named after it, but Lord of the Rings has over 80, which is a huge amount. And it makes sense because think about when Lord of the Rings was written, it just had a lot more time and there was a lot more species discovered in that time, right? But yes, that's a little aside there. But there are plenty more here. There are also some wasps. Their names are Baratheon, Lannisteri, Martelli, Targaryeni. I mean, they spelled it weird. Yeah, more pasta. Tully, which makes no sense to me, and Starkey. I'm like, how did they decide to name them that? Not the best, in my opinion. There's also a spider named after Varys the Spider. Akiers. I don't know how to say the first one. I'm sorry, Varys. And this was part of a batch. They named 6 different spiders after different pop culture figures, from Lord of the Rings to Harry Potter to Charlotte's Web. You can probably guess some of the names that were involved.
Charlatinas.
By the way, if there are any scientists here, this is what I want. This is what I want. The only thing I want. Since there are worms, I want one new worm named Torgonudo. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, definitely.
Then it'd be something I created.
So Zach, there are more than species that are named. I think a lot of people name their pets.
Oh, they do.
People do name their pets from things from books. I've also done that with my dog. It's not from Song of Ice and Fire, it's from a different book, but I don't know why we do that kind of stuff. I also name my computers. You guys ever do that when you get a new computer?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
My grill's named Lure.
Oh, right on. That's a fucking good name. So here's a little snippet. A company called Healthy Paws Pet Insurance, should look into that, analyzed over 1 million entries in their database, revealing that the Stark direwolves, Grey Wind, Ghost, Summer, everyone chant it with me, Lady, Shaggy Dog, and Nymeria, there you go, appear around 5,400 times. Whoa. Arya and Sansa combined for over 900 entries. The other Stark character names appear as well, including Catelyn and Jon Snow.
Our Lannisters were a little less popular, but there was some as well, and this is data from 2018, so there's certainly even more pets. I personally have I have 4 cats. 2 of them are named after characters. I have Jaqen, a cat, the cat of Black and White. I do say Jaqen because we named him before the show had Jaqen, so he's Jaqen. And then we have a Koja Mew, after Koja Mo, from the Summer Islands. Have you named any of your animals after any characters from anything?
Oh no,
Yeah.
my pets are always named after words from my created languages. However, there was one. I had the cat. If you heard my last presentation, his name is Roman, right? But his name came from a show that I worked on called Starcrossed, because Roman came home on the day that Starcrossed aired its last episode. And the guy who played Roman on the show, they have these tattoos, and he has blue eyes that are like here. And Roman had little markings on his face just like that, and he had little blue eyes, and so I thought, well, his name should be Roman.
Lovely.
By the way, some cat owner really has a really dour cat. There has to be a cat named Tywin.
Yes,
With
absolutely.
yellow whiskers.
2 quick asides. You also have a cat named Xerxes,
I do have a cat named Xerxes.
which is from a different fandom, like the real life fandom.
Yeah, I technically didn't name Xerxes, but yeah, he is named after the Emperor of Persia.
There you go.
I think Emperor is very loud.
Second aside, has anyone seen the cats running around this hotel?
Yes! People have a lot of different names for them. I don't know if anyone here has named them. I've seen people, because they're orange ginger cats, they're polydactyl, so I've seen people call them like Cersei and Jaime. I personally like to call them Joffrey, Tommen, and Marcella, because the inbreeding, and there's a mother, so that's my choice, but I've seen a lot of different names for those cats.
So sweet. I've only seen pictures. Just see
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so let's move on to the next section, I think. And after this, we're gonna maybe open it up to see if you guys have any pop culture references that we haven't touched on. I compiled. Oh yeah, I know Zach saw the document. He was like, "What are we doing here? What even is this?" I used TV tropes, the wiki, Google, Tumblr, Facebook, Twitter. I reached out to a ton of people, and I compiled a list of over 75 references in TV shows and movies to A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. I also compiled a few for music and comics, but we had enough to talk about. So I wanted to talk about some of them here and talk about some of my favorites. They'll talk about some of theirs and so on. So first of all, I think the first, it's funny because it's alphabetical here, and the first one is actually, I think the first reference I ever saw to Game of Thrones, to A Song of Ice and Fire, and it was in 30 Rock. And there's specifically a scene where if you've ever seen 30 Rock, one of the characters, this guy Grizz, he's reading a Game of Thrones. He's reading the first book, and like it's just like a weird aside, and all of a sudden he looks up and he goes, "Ned Stark is dead." And like that was my first ever reference to it. I had seen that before I even like knew Game of Thrones, I think, and so that was a good one for me.
By the way, can I throw something in here since you mentioned 30 Rock?
Absolutely.
This might be a little bit behind the scenes. I don't know if you know this, but after the first season of Game of Thrones, HBO approached NBC and basically paid them for promotion.
What?
Wow.
So that is why Game of Thrones was mentioned in like almost every single NBC show at the time. Parks and Rec.
Let's talk about this. That is interesting. Super interesting. There are a lot of NBC shows on this list. I was like, maybe Mike Schur is just like a really big fan because there's a million Mike Schur shows. Someone in his writing team. So interesting.
Yeah.
There's a couple in 30 Rock. I think there's another really good one that I asked people, so like some of them are more popular than others, and there's a second good one in 30 Rock. If you've seen it, you might remember where there's a very nerdy guy who's hitting on Tina Fey, and he goes, "In Game of Thrones, Zorro is a rich merchant prince who wishes to acquaint himself with the mother of dragons." Wink, wink. You know.
Right.
So that's
It's a deep cut. Bring up Zorro.
I know. I agree. I think so too.
So that had to happen after they aired season 2 then, right?
Yes, absolutely. That one was for the show. So Zach, I remember you had one when I asked you about references that you thought of immediately, right, from this year.
Which one was that?
The Righteous Gemstones.
Oh yeah, dudes.
Righteous Gemstones.
Yes!
We
Right?
got someone
Fuck yeah.
cosplaying a Righteous
Holy
Gemstones
shit!
mashup.
Oh my
God! Carry the cross!
I'm in the bumper now.
Okay.
He's the star in this case.
Dude, that's awesome. Well, I feel like I want to call him Kenny Powers because of Eastbound and Down, but what's his name? Like his actual human
Danny
name?
McBride.
Thank you. It's basically Kenny Powers. Danny
Yeah.
McBride, same energy. He's so good at writing, and I feel like Gemstones is really like his like polished up, like I don't want to say magnum opus, but it's like the realization of what he's been trying to do with these shows that he's been doing with HBO since the beginning. And he so succinctly like proved the point that I just made when he was talking to one of his brothers, I think, when he was basically trying to sell the idea of Zion's Landing, LOL, to his whole family. He was talking about Joe Jonas, right? It's Joe Jonas?
Yeah.
Okay, so he was talking about Joe Jonas, and they were like, what do you mean? I can't remember how the quote went exactly, I know it's in here, but the energy was, Joe Jonas, yeah, he's married to Game of Thrones. So like you guys know, like when you're talking to, like we're here, so we're technically not normies when it comes to the series, this whole story and everything, but you know when you are talking to normies, like you can bracket mostly within just saying Game of Thrones. So like him not knowing the name of the girl or really the intricacies of the show enough to know the character, but to understand how cool it is that JJ and someone from GOT got together, he could just simply succinct, it's like what you would say in real life, brilliant writing. He says, you know what I mean? The person married to Game of Thrones. He's married to Game of Thrones. so gorgeous. That if you haven't watched that show, please watch it.
It's amazing.
So good.
Yeah, so yeah, that one was one from just this year, but definitely you can tell that as the show ended, there was a drop-off in references, and thankfully in references they were very spoilery, because looking through this, I was like, there was a lot of shows that just decided to go all in on the spoilers, which is crazy talk to me. Like, for example, Blackish had a whole episode where the son shows his father the red wedding. And like, so he's very angry at him, but I'm like, really, like, if you're just watching Blackish, you just got spoiled on the red wedding. So there's a lot of categories like that, actually, where, like, I think in Modern Family, they just spoil Hodor's death, like, very blatantly, like, which, again, that's, like, deep into the show to spoil.
Did they say like hold the door?
Yeah, it's a whole thing where they, like, really go into it plot point by plot point. Yes.
They made their own content. They just literally stole an arc.
And so there's one I want to take a second to talk about. one of my favorites is The Office, because they really referenced it. Like, they went all in with speaking Dothraki. And I know you've written a little bit about that because they didn't ask you about that. They just did that. So I'd love for you to speak a bit about, how did you find out that they were doing that? Like, did you just turn on the TV and
Yes.
Yes.
That's how I found out. Because, I watched The Office like everybody else did at that time. So that is literally how I found out. And I was shocked listening to this, and I'm like, it's all correct. What the hell?
Rainn Wilson and Aaron Hannon, like two characters speak Dothraki. He's teaching Aaron how to speak Dothraki.
But I don't know who was responsible for putting it on the show or why they did it so well.
Hey, it was HBO, they paid them.
I mean,
it was NBC as well.
I know, but it was more like, it was like, here's, it was more like, production says, hey, find a way to mention Game of Thrones, and then it was up to the writers to figure out how, and that was what they decided to do,
Yeah, of course, but of course it would be Dwight, you know what I mean? Like, that's absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. I was disappointed. Like, I wish there had been some more characters that referenced Game of Thrones. I was like, I don't think Kelly was around at the time, but like, Kelly definitely liked Game of Thrones. Why did she not reference it? She should have been like excited as well. In my opinion, but The Office has technically referenced it again because there was also a little, and they have those little Emmys sketches, and they did one where it was set in the office, and there were office characters, there were people from Parks and Recreation, and there were Dothraki. So you can probably find that on YouTube if you want to see it. That's something that a lot of people might not have caught.
Like actual Dothraki in The Office.
Yes, that is exactly right. The Dothraki warrior.
Kelly names her dog Khaleesi.
Perfect.
There you go.
Oh, yes, she would. But yes, in the Emmy special, Dothraki warrior complains that the other warriors always forget to wash out the blood from the bowl. They keep horse hearts in, and then Leslie Knope shows up and delivers her next line in Dothraki. That one's cute.
I didn't realize there's so much Simpsons.
Yeah, there's a lot of Simpsons ones. I know that you're a Simpsons fan as well. I've seen all of the Simpsons up until this most recent season, almost 100%. It's a lot of Simpsons. And there's a lot. They have one in particular, the Surfsons, which is a whole spoof on the Simpsons, and I want to highlight one reference from it in particular. I don't know what animator, what writer came up with this, but there's a store in the background called Victorian's Secret. What a great one. I know, right? You referenced, I read your little blog post about The Office, and in that you did reference a certain Simpsons reference, and I was dying to know which one out of the 15 that I have referenced, which Simpsons reference was it?
Oh, it was Selma saying that she spoke Dothraki.
Okay,
I mean,
nice.
it's that was specifically my stuff,
Yes.
man. I was down with that.
Yeah, so that's one of them. You wanna?
I'm tweeting.
You're tweeting Victorian Secret, okay? But yeah, so in the Surfsons episode, they have some other cool little. Let's talk about the Simpsons for a minute. There's so many to talk about, but we'll talk about this one. They do have the three-eyed crow. Makes perfect sense, right? The Iron Couch, Ice Walkers. They've got Marguerite, a version of Jamie, who's very incestual and is actually played by the actual actor. So that's a nice little thing. And they do have Dr. Hibbert has the Strangler and Milk of the Poppy up in his office. But they also have actual references, like Game of Thrones exists in the world. They watch Game of Thrones. They have HBO Time is where they have Game of Thrones on it. They have, in one of the episodes, they have Game of Thrones and Game of Thrones prequel. That's the name of the show on the TV. Yes? Yes. There's one episode of The Simpsons where Homer is he's a pop culture reviewer. He's doing YouTube reviews. That is the episode. And he has one of his TV show recap reviews is Game of Thrones, and he does Who is Everybody? Name Plus. That's the name of his. It's a little name. Right?
Video on YouTube is that.
Nelson watches Game of Thrones.
Of course.
A little young for it, but he ha-has at all of the beheadings. There is a ride, a Game of Thrones ride. We have this to look forward to in our future. When we colonize Mars, there will be Game of Thrones the ride. Simpsons called it. They call so many things, so we know.
What's the ride gonna be?
I don't know, it's just Simpsons the Ride. It's one of the sponsors of the Mars colony.
I can imagine that one day, and I can't remember the whole thing. This is another aside, but I once like found an old note on my phone from like 2015 when I was thinking about like how to do a Game of Thrones theme park, and one of the things I saw was in all caps, throne drop in a pit. So apparently, you sit on the throne and then you fall into a pit. That's all I got so far.
I want you to fall into a pit like full of dragons, you know, and like
Jesus.
fire.
I was thinking
it's hot.
spikes, but that's worse.
Yeah.
At least you die pretty quickly with a spike. Your dragons keep you slowly. Cook you before you die. Never mind. Not so bad.
There are also references there. I don't know if you know, there are Simpsons books too. I actually own a couple of them, like C. Montgomery Burns' Handbook of World Domination. And I'm here to tell you that Burns has a reality show parody of Game of Thrones called Game of Drones, where he analyzes the morally ambiguous and dim-witted workers in the battle for the porcelain throne of the 7 sectors. Each week, the sole female employee finds an opportunity to remove her top. So you can find that now on the C. Montgomery Burns network, apparently. And there are a lot. I think another really popular one is this South Park one. You want to talk about that one
I was
for
just
us?
going to say that they made an entire episode about, they called it Black Friday, and it parodied both GOT and George R. R. Martin, and also just like his relationship with the fandom and how he writes the books. And, you know, like, South Park touches on a lot of pop cultural touchstones because, like, they write things kind of like a comedian would. They do things so quickly. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that documentary of theirs called, like, 6 Days to Air. But they work, it's very fascinating, their working process, and to know that they dedicated an entire episode to GOT at that time that also like went into the, I don't know what we call it, like, are we mad at George? Probably not.
No, I'm not.
You're not mad at George?
I'm speaking for every single person in here. We are
Yeah,
not.
everyone's like, what do I say to that? I don't know what it's
No.
okay to say to that. I mean, no one really knows what it's okay to say to that, but they made a decision to, you know, show him as the guy that's like sitting behind the scenes and sort of doling us out like these little treats, small bits at a time, and not quite finishing the things that we want to be finished. And I thought that that was just like really crazy that he got a whole episode instead of like a fish sticks joke. Instead of like Barbra Streisand's like a Mechazilla, you know, but the whole episode's not about Barbra Streisand. But like World of Warcraft, GOT, like WoW was a pretty big deal, and like we've all been living inside of it, so maybe it seemed like it was a big deal to us. But when you see like a major property like that completely capitalize on it, that's pretty wild. Like, again, just not to go back to The Simpsons for no reason, but holy crap, the amount of Game of Thrones stuff that they did is crazy.
You know, 30-something seasons.
Right, I guess you need some kind of material, but it was sort of lost on me in the 2010s, like just how much people needed to acknowledge it. Like, didn't it sort of benefit those NBC shows to seem culturally relevant? Like, people loved Ben Wyatt stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, it made us like it even more because he was geeking out over the throne like we would. And when I forget her name, is it Donna?
Yeah, Donna.
Yeah.
Donna.
You don't watch Game of Thrones? like that made us all feel like, oh, that show gets us. They
It was
should've-
actually a funny little mini arc there because Donna was the one who said, "Did they cancel Game of Thrones?"
Right.
And then later she was like, "You watch Game of Thrones?" Like, absolutely. Those
Right.
Dothraki dudes can get it.
Right.
Shouldn't get it.
They should have paid HBO for the opportunity to like make their show seem more relatable because like everyone was watching that show.
I think when I posted, I did say Parks and Recreation is my personal favorite
Yeah.
for references to the series, for Ben Wyatt's actual deep love. Love the books. I love it when he would never cancel Game of Thrones.
It's a crossover.
And I love it when he says, the Lannisters, while very wealthy, are not magical like the Warlocks of Kar. I don't correct you. That's like one of my absolute all-time favorite comedy show moments.
Actually, it's gonna bug me if I don't.
PLL, they did Pretty Little Liars.
Yeah, to share it. Tell them the Pretty Little Liars reference. I've never seen that show.
You would like it. You would. In the 5th episode of the 4th season, Spencer Hastings asks a student to figure out to whom a telephone number she found belongs. And after some time, he finally agrees to help her. That's the show, pretty much. She tells him that a Lannister always pays his debts, and he tells her that she would like the Lannisters. Oh my god. That's a way to talk to a girl.
I told you who they
You
were.
would like to, I just did the same thing to you. She replies that she could give him the entire Targaryen speech from season 1, but she won't waste her breath. Ooh, what a comeback to that.
Yes, good for her, I guess.
Right, yeah. She likes them.
I mean, I think a lot of references are them quoting certain lines. Like, I think the most common quotes are Lannister always pays their debts and winter is coming. I think are the ones I see the most often. But I think a lot of the animated shows are the ones that tend to do like a full-on spoof. The most often, so we've got like Bob's Burgers, Robot Chicken has done it, South Park, The Simpsons. Family Guy and American Dad have referenced Game of Thrones, but they haven't done a whole spoof on it. But there is one episode you wanted to mention, David, Community, wasn't there?
I mean, of that NBC lot, I think Community was my favorite, up there with Parks and Rec. But no, I just there was an entire episode where there was a parody of Game of Thrones that existed in that universe called Bloodlines of Conquest. And Britta at one point in time just gets annoyed with Abed, and so she's trying to spoil it for him through various means. But just, and so at one point in time she's like screaming at him, he's wearing earmuffs because he's prepared for it. But there's this, the line was, that's right, Prince Ironstone's daughter is his mother. There we go.
Yeah, there's a second reference to actual Game of Thrones and Community too, where Troy goes, if I wanted to know what happened in Europe a long time ago, I just watched Game of Thrones. Actually, that is, you talk about like people trying to spoil, I think that is another like trend I saw throughout these, is like often a plot point was like one person says they don't want to get spoiled and then someone else specifically spoils them. Like I've got Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, for example. One of the main characters, Rachel, she goes, a Lannister always pays her debts. I just started on season 1, so no spoilers. And then another character, Daryl, is like really mad at her for something. So he comes in angry and said, Ned Stark dies, by the way. And she goes, no! And he goes, don't get too attached to Rob either.
Do you guys think that
Crazy Ex is amazing, by the way. You gotta watch it.
Great show.
Do you guys think that, what's it called, like twist culture, or like, not big reveal, because that's, that's a thing, but like sort of like unexpected twist culture was partly injected into that energy they just try to capture, and like the spoiler that in that show, right? Of like, don't tell me this thing, and that being like the takeaway of how they like took the energy of GOT and put it in their show. Do you guys feel like, and this is to everyone, that like that's partial, like that Game of Thrones, like maybe with Ned, maybe mostly with the Red Wedding, is like sort of responsible for that uptake?
I think the biggest first one was Dumbledore. It was the Dumbledore one in Harry Potter. I think that was the first big the first big spoiler moment where people were like in line, people were getting spoiled, and it was and serious too, I guess. But that was before, so I guess the first one would have been serious for me, like in my experience. What about you?
I mean, come on, what about the line? What a twist! Robot Chicken, which was talking about M. Night Shyamalan because Sixth Sense. And then it's like Sixth Sense was a big one, and actually people were really good about not revealing it at that time. Then it basically became a gimmick, then it became a joke, then we forgot about it, and then Game of Thrones came along and it was like, oh, we're ready to do this again.
Sean.
I was exactly going to say Sixth Sense. There was a wave of movies after that Fight Club.
Yeah.
Like, there's a million movies, 7. It was like I feel like it was a trend in film, at least, in the wake of Sixth Sense.
Why didn't TV shows really do it then?
Because at that time, you couldn't reliably see it. Now we could just like
DVR it, watch it online.
Yeah, you had to be at home Thursday, 8 o'clock or whatever. Does that make sense? And so now we can be sure to have seen all the episodes in order on our schedule, but at that time you couldn't.
That's true, like with live airing, because I mean, that was the whole thing with the water cooler effect.
Yeah.
You came to work the next day and we were talking about the spoiler because nobody knew about it beforehand and everybody knew about it afterwards. Now that's not the case. There's not a guarantee that everybody's seen anything by a certain point in time.
Right, unless like the network that is releasing the thing isn't dropping the ball at once like Netflix does.
Yeah.
Like if you still have a staggered release, there's still somewhat that like vibe there still. So like I guess if I can modify my positive then, like rather than just the twist itself, like the main character dying really early thing, I feel like I started to see a lot of that more in the teens after the first season of GOT. Strange.
So, I think you might have noticed that most of these are comedies. that usually dramas aren't referencing them, but there are some. I want to shout out my personal favorite science fiction series, The Expanse, which does have a few references to Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. The TV show has, for the most recent season, has a very iconic line where Kamina Drummer says, she's giving a speech and she says, "We are unbowed, unbroken, unbent." So she just twists it a little, but she's a Martell. She's definitely the Belters or Dornishmen. So I approve of that. But there's also a reference, they do a little Easter egg to recast characters, people in Doctor Who, people in other sci-fi, but they have a G. Clegane for Gregor Clegane. And in the books, there are characters named Stanny, Rennie, and Rob. I think we know what those are references to.
I usually call Stannis Stanny in general. That's like his default.
Well, you know that book was co-written by George R. R. Martin's assistant.
Yeah, indeed, Ty Frank. And the book was actually, when it was, the concept was first created in a tabletop game that George R. R. Martin and other authors were part of. So he was technically part of the conception of the world. Yes, Sean?
I just wanted to say that you should call Stannis Your Grace.
Oh, man. I'm having flashbacks to that panel we did about Stannis. Or were you there? You weren't there for that one. But yeah, I did it. I was on a panel all about Stannis, and I think I was the only person that despised him. So I had a lot of fun.
I don't like Stannis either.
Actually, you on that panel?
I do
Yes,
like
yes
I
it
remember
was.
now. I tried to block all that out.
Well, let me tell you, there are a lot more. We cannot possibly say them all. If there's any that we missed that either of you would like to make sure we mention, now's your chance. I'm going to turn it to the audience.
Game of Bones, the pornography parody. That's right, baby. I gotta say that it's probably like, I can't get into those, it's too much talking, but they did it, and it seemed pretty high budget, but again, like, once they get to it, it's kind of awkward because they've been doing so much talking. Okay.
These were just TV shows we mentioned. I want to say the number one movie and the number one reference that we got was the movie Logan Lucky, which I've never seen, but there's a prison riot scene in it where all the prisoners, their request is the winds of winter. That was by far the number one commented reference from people. Yeah, there were like so many. I'm definitely gonna have to make like a video compiling this. It'll take me a year, but I'll do it. Yes, right there, Julie.
You have to get my personal favorite reference, because I'm a dork, is the Sesame Street.
Yes, that's one where they did a whole episode on this. She said the Sesame Street. Westeros is what they did.
They do chairs, and they play like musical chairs, basically. And there was Respect is Coming. And Cersei's Power Respect.
By the way, did you get My Little Pony on there? Just checking.
I do not have My Little Pony on there. There we go. He got one I don't have. There we go. But yeah, Sesame Street did do the whole one. They referenced like they referenced the Red Wedding and beheading on it. I was like, this seems not appropriate for Sesame Street, but okay. Kids don't know what this means. Yeah, right there.
I got just real quick, kind of obscure new show on Netflix called Human Resources.
Yes, it's in Big Mouth and Human Resources.
And Shane Wizard, he had a picture from something Vanilla on there and said, "This is my favorite Shane Wizard" or something.
Absolutely, yes. To repeat that for anyone, the Shame Wizard in Big Mouth and Human Resources has a framed photo signed from Septa Unella. And she's and it says shame sign, the shame lady.
Yes.
Is how it's signed. So that was a nice one for sure. Anybody else have any that you want to mention?
I'm just gonna throw it out. I still haven't finished the show. I don't plan to. Sorry, I love so much to do. But I will say the constant references to the show in other shows is like soul crushing. Just like I didn't know that. Like I didn't know about Hodor until right now.
If anywhere I should think I'm safe, it's here. So I have to say I don't feel bad.
I walked into my own trap.
Yeah.
My own journey. Like hello, where am I? But no, they're like nonstop references. Even like ads. Like I remember walking into AT&T and there was Cersei on the front, and I was like, okay, I just can't go to the mall today.
I can tell you a funny one with Sean right there. Our first Con of Thrones with Zach. They had like They did like an opening ceremony sketch where they referenced Lady Stoneheart. And at the time, Sean, we do History of Westeros, he's our co-host, and he was our unsullied perspective. He had not read the books, he'd only seen the show. And so we go to Con of Thrones, and he's like, I wonder if I'll get spoiled on anything while I'm there. And the opening ceremonies, they have Lady Stoneheart, played by Hannah of Game of Thrones, and Sean's like, okay, so Catelyn comes. Okay, so yeah, he's basically like trial by fire right there, immediately getting spoiled.
You were able to draw that much from it, from the squeaky or the creaky voice?
Yeah, well, because if you remember, it was a whole sketch
Right.
of characters that didn't make, from the books that didn't make the show, and they were like in a counseling session.
Right,
So
right,
like
right.
obviously,
You gotta cover your ears, man.
That's right, wow.
I had accepted it. To be fair, I knew I wasn't gonna be a sweet summer child anymore after that.
I get it. How cool is it that the term, the phrase, whatever you want to call it, unsullied, has caught on like it has?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
to say that it's
Someone specifically that hasn't spoiled themselves in certain parts of Song of Ice and Fire. That's like such an awesome victory for fan culture, I just have to say.
Actually, the expression "my sweet summer child."
Yeah.
What about that?
Oh, people say it all the time.
Oh,
Yeah.
great, that's a different point. Yes, those are both good.
I've got one more movie reference I want to make sure I mention, which is the new Space Jam. There's a planet, there's a Westeros planet in the new Space Jam with the astrolabe around it, and you see Night King in the background of one of the shots. But then also they go, like apparently Foghorn Leghorn goes to the Game of Thrones planet, and he dresses as Daenerys and rides a dragon and goes, "Winter, I say, winter is coming." I'm like, I have not seen it. It sounds terrible. Yes, the Night King is in it in the background, like they're playing basketball, and the Night King's like, woo. I do like that one.
You mentioning the Game of Thrones world made me think of Westworld, and there's
Yes.
this scene where you have Dan and Dave working on the dragon. Right?
Yes, absolutely there is. And there's some other things in Westworld that people like to think of as references. Like there's a pin that a character is wearing that kind of looks like a Hand of the King pin. It's kind of a stretch to me. And then there's a scene where there's like a wolf running. I don't really agree with that one, but maybe they meant it to be a reference. And George has specifically gone on record saying like, come on, do Westeros World. Let's do it. He didn't seem entirely joking at the idea, to be honest.
It's kind of repetitive getting a theme park. Honestly, like, how could we make Westeros World? I feel like, don't we think that it's made enough cultural impact that like it could support itself? Like there could actually be a theme park. Is that crazy to
I
think?
think maybe a Renaissance festival type thing.
Yeah, I think it should be centered around drinking and eating.
Yes, definitely. Lots of feasting everywhere, I
Yeah.
think.
77 courses.
I mean, because you know, I've met the person who made the Game of Thrones cookbook.
Yeah.
I mean, there's enough material there. You know?
Absolutely.
And people willing to like participate too, like equal support.
Yeah.
I think we have just a brief moment here, as we are, you know, let's talk about some of these music references a little bit too, specifically because tomorrow night we have our very own Manimals, who have a whole Song of Ice and Fire concept album. Like talk about like warm the facts, right? I hope we'll see you all there. But there's a lot of other ones. Like one really interesting thing is that HBO, and this really lines up with talking about like the paying people at NBC, is that HBO, in order to reach a more diverse audience, they commissioned three rap albums exactly for the Throne, and then Catch the Throne Volumes 1 and 2. And then catch it, yeah. And so I didn't realize that like they were doing that very specifically to reach out to other segments of the audience, and I think that's pretty cool that they did that actually. And I mean, there's a lot of different metal and rap songs that reference the Song of Ice and Fire. My personal favorite is The Sword. I'm friends with them, Ziz's, and so I am. Yeah.
What?
Ever want to see The Sword?
Yes,
let us
I
know.
do. I love this
Absolutely.
band.
Whatever, and seriously, let us know, and you can go backstage for their store when they're there.
Holy shit.
Aziz, I don't know. Aziz has probably been to like 20. I don't know. A lot of Sword shows. 100. I don't know. Yeah. The Sword has actual songs referencing A Song of Ice and Fire. They have a song To Take the Black, and the music's really good. So I highly recommend checking them out. One other band that I want to shout out that performed at Con of Thrones the previous year, the first year, Danny and the Targaryens. They have a song, Drogo, he did it. Their music is really catchy. It's absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. Absolutely, I love it. I absolutely love it. I hope they get to make it to another con one of these years, actually. I would love to see that. Oh, yeah. And so, there were also lots of references in video games and comics, but as you can tell, there's only so much time we have to talk about all of this. Something I did want to make sure we touched on was tattoos, though, because I think that is a really cool thing, and I wanted to see, does anyone in this room have A Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones tattoo? Right there, right there, right there. I see 3 people. Okay, tell us what you got. Start with you. What do you got?
I got a whole leg.
Can you come over here and show it, everybody?
Yeah, come up here. Yeah, awesome. Effect on your body. Oh, wow.
So I started with the Night King, and then Westeros after he turned to the dragon. Got the Helm's Helm, Stark down here. Hand of the King, that's Ned, has his blow on after he got beheaded. Weirwood Tree with 3-eyed Raven. Got the Court of Bravos down there, dagger, already used.
Did I see Stannis the sigil on that inner thigh? Let me see the inner thigh.
Show us the inner thigh.
What's that inner thigh?
And then we got Tyrion. And the Battle of Blackwater Bay over here.
You're getting more, right?
Yeah, I got a few more pieces to go, but I need to figure out
What else are you playing? What's the plan?
maybe something for the Martells.
Ooh, yes, hell yeah. Definitely do my tells. Okay, next up, who else? We got another tattoo. Do you want to come up here and show us?
Sure.
You don't have to, but I'd love it if you did. Yeah, let's see this. Ooh, yeah, he's got a Night King with the werewood coming out. Turn around so that people can see there. Yeah, perfect. Awesome, right? Yeah, very cool, man. Yes. All right, yeah, you play. Come here, Clint. Let's see what you got. Show us these tats.
Also Weirwood.
Yeah, awesome.
And then the Night of the Laughing Tree.
Ooh, very cool. Very
There's
cool.
a little House Blood sigil that she's stepping on. There's a House Frey sigil that's
Nice, very cool.